Lynne has been a former Dean of Service Learning at Seymour College. We welcome you. Your presentation will provide an overview of empathy, exploring its definitions, its dimensions, and the cognitive and affective components and significance of empathy in varying contexts. Without further ado, I hand over to you, and a big warm greeting from someone else in Australia for a change. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. I'm very aware of your timelines are tight, and so I'm not going to apologise for basically reading a script so that I don't go off track and I don't get too conversational, and I stick to the timeline, because it is, I'm going to say, irritating when things get too far behind, especially for the presenters. I haven't been associated with any particular school for the last 4 years. I've had a consultancy, but I would give credit for my background in service learning for the last 20 years to the Christian Brothers and Ross Trevor College in Adelaide. That's where I guess I had most of my formation, and that's where a lot of my values came from. And I was able to create and build a program there, and then create and build a program in my next school. And for the last 4 years, I've been freelancing. And ironically, most of my work has been interstate. And so I've been working on that and really enjoying it. But today, I want to talk about empathy, and I'm sure that some of the things I say will be a bit of a repeat of what Tracy said, and also of what we've just heard from Susan. Maybe it's an Adelaide thing. But we all have an understanding of what empathy is, but is it understanding enough? What use is empathy without action? Today, I want to talk about building empathy and resilience in our young people through programs that are easily embedded and implemented in school or college programs. Empathy should not be reserved for those on the margins. Empathy is a much deeper engagement than sympathy and requires being with rather than being for another. In all examples of reaching out to those made poor and the vulnerable, no one wants to be a passive recipient of our charity. There's no dignity in that, and empathy requires us to be fully present and engaged with those we're with. I think it was Teresa talked about emotional empathy, and that can be distressing, whereas compassionate empathy is the balance between the cognitive and emotional empathy. We can't assume that students will develop empathy just by providing them with information and programs. They need to be led into it with an incrementally developed program that allows for discussion and reflection, right from introducing them to the idea or topic through the process and beyond. True empathy is built in the debrief process. This empathy creates a change of heart. And when we connect the head and the heart and we put the hands to work, the world has to be a better place. The place for empathy in the curriculum is everywhere, across the grades and across the curriculum. Some faculties in schools will cop out, claiming there's no place to embed issues of justice and issues that build empathy. There is absolutely somewhere to do this in every curriculum area. Some teachers will say that they have to deviate from core curriculum or lose teaching time. I've done some work with teachers in India and convinced them, and they're under tremendous pressure to teach to the curriculum because their students are under tremendous pressure to achieve scores because of the absolute numbers there, and move them from teaching the heart of the curriculum to embedding issues of empathy and justice, and it's been very successful. Embedding issues of empathy is not a layer of extra work, it's simply good teaching. There's debate about whether service learning programs in schools should be compulsory. If we embed service learning activities that build empathy in all curriculum areas, all students are naturally exposed. In teaching empathy, we need to ensure we're not promoting pity or guilt. Pity promotes the paternalistic values that Susan was talking about, and guilt is a useless emotion. I do agree, though, that the students who are in the privileged schools should be exposed to all of the programs that we've been talking about, especially ones that really move the heart, because they're the ones who can use their privilege in their careers and their later life and give a voice to the voiceless. The SDGs, like Tracy said, can be embedded in always into the curriculum. I often ask teachers to bring their favourite unit of work and look how justice and service can be built into it. And they're often surprised at how easy that is. I've taken groups overseas where activities were built into 4 curriculum areas at the same time. That group was prepped in topics other than their curriculum content for a number of months before they left. We looked at topics such as stereotypes and prejudice, coming as a guest, groupness, and many more, so that they could be fully present to those they're working with rather than being distracted from their purpose. Of course, in junior school, students are not emotionally competent to deal with the harsh reality of some of the injustices of the world, but we can build empathy easily into their everyday life and look at identity, culture, environmental issues. It's never too soon to introduce the issues of recycling and other issues. Then issues of social justice can be introduced and social action can be built in so that empathy for those outside the school community can be built. That Solar Buddy program that Tracy mentioned, I hope her students know that because of the Solar Buddy program in New Guinea, it's had all kinds of benefits. Students use them to do their homework, but because the students have those lamps to do their homework, the mothers are not now using kerosene lamps to do their cooking, and it's reduced a lot of the lung issues and breathing issues of a lot of the children. So these programs often have a real domino and knock-on effect. Programs that build genuine empathy are not standalone tick box activities. They require prebrief, reflection, and debrief opportunities, and should have a context that is visible in the school's vision and strategic plan. In a perfect situation, the environment around the school or the college just becomes empathy is what we do around here. It's a living, breathing thing that nobody needs to touch or verbalize, but just becomes, this is who we are. Educators are now dealing with a very unique situation, I feel. Mental health is a huge issue here in Adelaide amongst our teenagers, and I'm sure across the world. I was in Ireland working recently, and thus they are feeling the same. Students that were disconnected from community for 2 years had a lot of time to think about themselves. Research about what characteristics are those of successful students has shown that family background, what school you've been to, who you connect with, is in no way as integral to a student's success as their ability to show resilience. It's up to schools to provide these programs, and students need to make and take those opportunities that will build their resilience and therefore empathy. So what kinds of programs build resilience and empathy? Programs that take students out of their comfort zone. Not the convenient thing that I can do it because I've got time and I've got money, but something that takes them out of their comfort zone with support. Programs that are more than well-meaning feel-good acts. Students need to push through programs like this with the support of adults around them. Empathy is never built by opting out. In my opinion, having awareness days does very little to build empathy. Most of the awareness raising days means that students get to buy and wear an armband or do a dance or wear coloured socks or some such activity, and does very little to change the heart. The most positive thing may be that they raise money for an organisation that needs it to conduct their programs. This is an act of charity, not an act of empathy. When organisations say that they're in solidarity with a cause and are having an awareness day, they would build more empathy and make more of a long-term impact if they added an advocacy effort into their activities, such as writing to politicians and speaking up for the cause. I feel like this is what Susan's working towards there in Nairobi, being active, having an active voice, it's far more effective than any little social action. Joan Chichester is an American Benedictine nun. In her latest book, The Time Is Now, she very appropriately challenges us, saying that passivity leads to silence. We can be empathetic without action, but that doesn't help anyone. She says many of us are waiting on somebody else, and that there's been too much separation of the mind and the soul. She predicts that this current state of abiding self-centeredness will eventually bite us, and students need to understand that the world should be better because we've been here. Schools have a wonderful chance to develop empathy in students through planned activities that grow an uncommon courage to challenge injustices. A number of students that I've placed in programs that develop empathy have actually changed their career choice. Where they may have been in favour of a certain career before their experience of building empathy, they've now switched to a career that is more of a vocation and a people-centred focus. As an example, a number of students who have accompanied me to India changed their career choice and are now teachers of students with special needs. Another example is that a group of students I took 5 or 6 years ago overseas, are now 21, 22, approached me earlier in the year. They called me Motes and they said, take us back, Motes. I said, if you can find a decent group of people, number-wise, I mean, not character-wise, I'll take you. Within 2 days, they said, we've got 8. Is that enough? So in January, I'll be taking a group of young people who've been before, who want to build on what they did. I think that's a demonstration that their first experience was navigated well and had a real impact. Jean Vanier says, when we work with vulnerable people, everybody begins to change. Those with power become more humble, and the vulnerable will leave behind themselves the view of themselves as victim. Plato says, the highest form of intelligence is empathy. It requires us to suspend our egos. It's so important to leave ego out of whatever we do. I'll just start that quote again. I'll get off my soapbox. Plato says, the highest form of intelligence is empathy. It requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. It requires profound purpose, larger than the self kind of understanding. Thank you for listening.